In the original game, the sixth world was Pluto. Ironically, despite being the smallest planet, Pluto was the largest and most diverse in the game. Entropy had a different layout, but was similarly huge and diverse. The board music was played by a violin instrument, a melody that started out sounding mournful, and then it gets rather, I guess I would call it, distorted. It made me feel depressed and unnerved, not something I would want to hear while trying to sleep. Strangely, none of the levels were from the previous worlds were present here. Instead, there were 8 brand new icons. The bosses this time were Megalon, Batra, and Mechagodzilla. As usual, the first thing I did was go to the quiz level for another interrogation from FaZe. But when I got there, I noticed something different. Instead of the usual goofy GH1D0RA music, it was a password theme. The music change seemed to be intentional because after the first 2 questions at the start, the quiz started to take a darker tone. Do you like ice cream? Action yes, reaction weird face number 1. Do you like clowns? Answer yes, reaction weird face number 10. Is time slipping through your fingers? Answer yes, reaction weird face number 2. Do you have any regrets? Answer yes, reaction hurt. Do some people deserve to die? Answer no, reaction weird face number 3. Is it safe to go out at night? Answer yes, reaction weird face number 5. Do you find it hard to sleep at night? Answer yes, reaction weird face number 9. Have you ever killed anyone? Answer no, reaction weird face number 7. Do you want to kill anyone? Answer no, reaction angry. Are you actually accomplishing anything? Answer no, reaction weird face number 4. Does life have any meaning? Answer no, reaction love. Do you like Mothra? Answer no, reaction maniacal. I knew the last one was going to be gameplay. It was going to be a gameplay related question, but I had no idea what the result would be. I answered honestly because I said before I never liked Mothra. No one liked playing as Mothra in the game, and there was a good reason for that. Every other time Mothra gets hit, she gets slammed back to the left corner of the screen, and she sucks at fighting because her attacks are so weak. The only benefit Mothra has was being able to fly over obstacles at some levels. So I answered no, and FaZe actually replied back to me. Not only with a maniacal expression, but with the text, "Too bad." I was taken back to the map screen. I was shocked to see that Godzilla and Guirus had disappeared from the board, leaving only Mothra. FaZe had just fucked me over, needless to say. I was pissed, but there wasn't anything I could do. And I'm willing to bet, even if I had said yes, I would have been stuck with Mothra anyways. FaZe giveth, and FaZe taketh away. I took a deep breath and got ready to explore. There were 2 paths I could take through the board. I decided to take the lower one. This turned out to be a good choice for reasons I'll get to momentarily. The first world ahead of me was a forest, so I started there. Almost immediately I got an eerie feeling. There was something about this level that just seemed off to me, even more than the previous ones. Perhaps it was a pitch black background. I've always been afraid of being in the forest at night. Something about all those trees makes me feel surrounded and vulnerable. And the fact that I was stuck as Mothra didn't help. Playing the game's previous worlds as Godzilla gave me a feeling of bravery. Being in control of the king of monsters, I'd be able to handle just about anything in my way. But it's not like that with Mothra, no feeling of strength or security. Now I'm just a weak, easily overwhelmed bug, traversing into the unknown. Back to the level, the music had a new instrument, sounding like a woodwind, followed by slow, rhythmic drums and chiming bells. Gave me this feeling that I was intruding into some dangerous place I really should not be. After a while, I encountered the first enemies of the stage, or at least I assumed they were enemies. They were strange, long-legged, deer-like creatures. Instead of attacking, they were just idly walking around. I went to approach them and they ran away. I thought about shooting one with an I-beam to see what would happen, but it seemed wrong. These creatures were harmless, so I passed over them and continued through the level. About halfway through, I encountered groups of the deer-like animals, and also 2 new creatures, a sloth-like creature with a beak climbing onto a tree, and a hairy raptor-esque beast that was preying on the deer. It was very surreal watching these creatures interact. I didn't feel like I was playing a video game, but rather I was traveling through a forest in some other dimension. The creatures ignored me for the most part, although the raptors did attack me when I got too close, or if I attacked them first. I know I shot one of them to help one of the deer creatures escape. I got clawed at, but confrontation was easily avoided by flying to the top of the screen. After that, I had to choose whether I wanted to play the levels with the hourglass or the TV screen. I picked the latter. What I got was not what I expected. When I pressed a button to start a level on the TV screen like I normally would, the screen with an animation popped up. There was also music in the background, which was a goofy GH1D0RA music that used to be playing in the quiz levels. I was somewhat unsettled by this because it was so strange. I also found it a bit spooky because I had a shirt that looked just like that when I was a kid. After starting the animation, you could go back to the board by pressing any button. After that, I had no idea what to expect from the rest of these icons. I wanted to try an hourglass icon next. I was somewhat relieved when the actual level came up though. It was certainly an unorthodox looking level, all brown with time measuring instruments floating in the air and gigantic grandfather clocks in the background. The music was the same as the board screen. And very early in the level, I encountered something else I didn't expect to see. Original enemies from the game? And not just that, it seemed to be a whole fleet of them, and the yellow tanks, which were normally immobile, could now move. I took some damage, but it was nothing I couldn't handle. But the most interesting thing about this level was the colored hourglass items. There were 3 of these. Number 1, a blue hourglass that made time slow down and filled the level with enemies from the past. Number 2, a red hourglass that made time speed up and filled the level with enemies from the future. Number 3, a green hourglass that set time to normal speed and filled the level with the original game's enemies. I encountered the blue hourglass first. As stated, the game started to slow down, and I saw the enemies from the past, which were 5 different types of prehistoric animals. I don't know much about prehistory, but I believe all these animals represent real animals. The level went into another segment, and I encountered the green hourglass. Then I fought the original enemies again. It was the same 5 types, so I didn't take any screenshots, but in the last segment I encountered the red hourglass, and the enemies that must have been from the future. Now, whether or not the game was showing me 8-bit renditions of creatures that will actually exist thousands of years into Earth's future, I have no idea. But with that thought in mind, I found this particular segment to be pretty eerie. And it was made more tense because everything moved faster. One of the future enemies bore a striking resemblance to something I saw in a book once called Trudon Man. Another looked like some kind of organic spaceship. There were only one of the 5 types of future creatures, and when it appeared, all the others ran for their lives, leaving me alone to battle it. It could fly, but its sprite didn't actually move, and its single attack was firing a lightning bolt from its face. Even so, it was surprisingly powerful, and I suppose it could be considered a mini-boss. After defeating it, it left a health power-up that restored the health and energy I'd lost fighting it, which was convenient. It seemed I would need all the help I can get to beat this world with Mothra alone. After the previous stage I called Time Warp. The next stage appeared to be a toxic waste dump. As you can see, the place looked grungy and inhospitable. The music was a short looping of an ambient synthesizer song. Listening to it made me feel like I had sniffed some toxic fumes myself, and it was messing with my head the whole time. I even felt like I was choking while playing this level. The enemies all seemed to be mutated to some degree. In the above screenshot, you can see green enemies with bird skulls that jump out of the waist to spit projectiles. There's also a brownish cow skeleton monster with spider legs. Halfway through the level, I even saw one of the deers from the forest. It was alone, and when I saw it, it was drinking toxic waste out of a barrel with an anteater-like tongue. I was moving over to try to make a stop, but then this flock of skullbirds came out of nowhere and started attacking. The deer was scared by this and ended up running off the ground into the toxic waste. I feel bad for it. One of the birds bit me, but I regained health quick from killing all of them. They were rather weak. I pressed onwards. Of all the levels in Entropy, this was probably the most normal, in that there were little deviants that move forward, smash things formally in the original game. I encountered more creatures through the level, like tentacle blobs and some kind of deformed thing with human-like teeth. I didn't feel like provoking them into a fight, so I kept on flying near the top of the screen. I still had to deal with occasional flocks of birds now and then, but at the end of the level was a large bluish-green lake, and there I encountered another mini-boss. Some kind of monster with a long neck and a whale skull. It attacked with a mouth projectile, and by charging into you, it also could go underneath the water and rapidly emerge from a different place. It was harder to beat than the boss from the Time Warp, and it had a lot of health because it must have taken me 3 minutes to defeat it. It let out a really loud noise when it died, and then sank back into the water as I left the screen. Back on the board, I went on the nearest level icon I hadn't seen yet, which is a white tree. As I guessed, the level is a winter-themed recolor of the forest stage. But unlike the regular forest, I didn't feel unnerved starting this one. I think the music had a lot to do with it. It was a gentle, calm song. It almost sounded romantic. It was quite stress-relieving, and the forest itself looked much less ominous covered in snow. I traveled through the first segment enjoying the atmosphere for 4 minutes, when suddenly I realized something. I hadn't seen a single creature since I started the level. Where were all the animals? Soon after, I left the screen and the next segment started. In the second segment, I was still in the winter forest, but now the music was gone. I was starting to feel suspicious, but then I reminded myself that there were other empty levels in the game, and this was likely another one of them. But then I heard something familiar. It was a 12-second looping music from Unforgiving Cold, starting up. I could feel my heart sink as I came across this horrible sight. It was a group of dead deer creatures covered in snow. Judging from the blackish-blue tone of their skin, they must have all frozen to death. On closer inspection, some were missing body parts. Now I was frightened, but I still had to keep going. Before exiting the level, I was really hoping to see something resembling the previous forest animals in a living state, and sure enough I did. It was a creature much like the beaked sloth, except this time it had white fur, and was more of a beaked gorilla. It was walking very slowly when I saw it, but I was happy to see at least something alive. However, it didn't stay that way for long. A pack of raptors, who must have sensed that something still was alive, came rushing in from the side of the screen. The beaked gorilla didn't stand a chance. One of the raptors immediately lunged at it and ripped open its back legs. These winter raptors acted far different from their temperate relatives. While the other raptors only attack when hunting prey or when provoked, these winter raptors seemed to have gone all insane. They attacked everything in sight. One was running back and forth, clawing at nothing. Even the noises they made sounded different, more high-pitched and enraged. As I left the second segment, I even saw two raptors fighting to the death. They were both covered in injuries, and one of the raptors had been blinded in one eye. I took a screenshot, but I didn't stay to see who won the fight. I only had to get through one more segment before I could get to the board screen. But in this segment, I was no longer in the winter forest, but instead a very empty grassy plain with a bright gray moon in the sky. The pleasant music of Winter Forest, Part 1 had returned. And immediately I started to feel dread. This is going to sound crazy, but it's the absolute truth. The game made this level one of my memories. After a long stretch of nothing, I reached a lake, and then the moon moved down from the sky, and began to hatch like an egg when it did. A curled up humanoid figure fell into the lake as the moon's halves quickly disintegrated. I heard a splash when it hit the water. Then a moment of silence. Then the screen began to shake, and a new creature emerged from the water. And thus I was introduced to the monster I call the Moon Beast. This was the only screenshot I took, as I was focusing all my concentration on winning the fight, and it was the most difficult fight yet. Stronger than any of the previous bosses, this creature would have been hard to take down with Godzilla, and with Mothra, it seemed nearly impossible. I suppose I would consider myself fortunate that the beast lacked any attacks like Gigan Saw, because if it did, I would never have won this. I barely had 3 bars of health when I finally killed this abomination. But what happened afterwards is hardly what I would call a reward. I've been trying to keep my promise and suppress this memory for years, but it seems as if I have to get it off my chest. This is a very painful memory for me. But the game already knows about it, and I think you should too. I'll just tell you the important parts, because I don't like bringing this experience back to my head unless I have to. Back when I was in middle school, I had a girlfriend named Melissa. She suffered some kind of mental disorder that caused her to go into episodes. When she was in an episode, she would stand or sit perfectly straight and still, and her face would instantly lose any expression she had before. She would speak very clearly, without any hint of emotion. When it was over, she would start trembling, and sometimes bury her face in her hands, and remain silent for several minutes. I can't really convey the feeling it gave me in words, and I won't try. You have to see this in person to understand. But despite this, she was a very kind person, and I cared about her dearly. We liked to hang out in the field at night and look at the stars, but one night she didn't say anything to me at all. She just stared directly at the moon, trembling. I tried to talk to her, but she suddenly sprung up, ran right into traffic. I tried to stop her, but it was too late. She got hit by a truck and was killed that night. I looked her right in the eyes when the wheels went over her neck. The sight has always haunted me. I know the game knows about this because after I defeated the Moon Beast, this happened. After that, the game went back to the board screen. It was all I could do to not burst out screaming, and my hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the controller. I knew the game was going to test me if I kept playing, but I had no idea it would go so far, or that it was even capable of doing what it just did. I could feel my brain going haywire as I asked myself, did the game just read my mind? That didn't seem possible. What other explanation was there? It was then that I could no longer deny what was now obvious. The game is alive, and not only that, it can also establish some kind of mental connection with the player. And yet, I couldn't convince myself to stop playing. I don't know if it was the game messing with my mind or just my stubborn curiosity, but even with the previous revelation, I really wanted to see this through the end, even more than I did before I beat Dementia. Terrifying as it might be, even dangerous, I knew that if I quit playing, I would never be able to stop thinking about it. If I tried to restart the game, I might go back to being normal again. How many people ever get to witness something like this firsthand, let alone be able to take screenshots of the whole thing? Fucked up as it was, this was the experience of a lifetime. But even so, I couldn't take any chances with my health. I had the TV remote right next to me, ready to turn the TV off in case I felt I was in actual danger, and if that didn't work, I would pull the plug out of the wall or just run out of the room. Surely that would be enough. Whatever powers the game has, it seemed to be confined to what it can show on the TV, and whatever its mental connection could do, the latter was what worried me. I still didn't know what I was dealing with, so I wasn't about to underestimate it. I took a break for a few minutes to calm my nerves, and then I went back to the game. And speaking of TVs, there was a TV screen icon right below the white forest I had just left. And because the first animation was so bizarre, I figured to try it again to see what happens. Although I expected the same animation, I got a totally different one. Weird. The music for this one was a Neptune board music. Fitting, I suppose, since it's a fishman and all. I can't help but wonder what the point of these things are. There was one more TV screen icon, so I figured it must have a unique animation of its own too. I was going to make sure to see what it was before I left Entropy. But then it was time for another level. The gold brick icon was the closest thing, so I went to that, and I started up in a gold labyrinth level. My health and power were refilled, not sure how or why, but I was glad not to be heading in the unknown nearly dead. I also noted that my Mothra sprite had shrunk to half its original size. The music was slow, ominous drum beating, with female vocals kicking in about a minute into it. Quite haunting. The gold labyrinth itself was an anomaly. I'm not sure how this level would have played out if I was using Godzilla or Guires, because flying seemed necessary just to get around this place. Another thing that caught my attention was that, when you go left, your monster actually turns and faces the left. I know that sounds stupidly obvious, but in the original game you were only supposed to move to the right. So when you tried to move left, your monster ended up walking or flying backwards. The level was apparently gigantic in size, because every time I thought I had reached an end to it, or thought I was going to end up back where I started, I encountered something totally new. Things like lava blockades, new enemies, and statue faces. And I found one statue face at a dead end with a wide, open-eyed stare. That night Melissa died. She had an expression on her face that looked exactly like this the whole time. Even when she got hit by the truck, she still had that same expression. I can't help but feel like something really is staring at me from behind the screen when I look at this. I really didn't want to be reminded of that night anymore, so I left the statue almost as soon as I found it. I needed to find the exit anyways, which proved to be no simple task. It felt like this level stretched on forever in all directions. I must have wandered around the level for at least 15 minutes before I finally saw something. It was a creature that wasn't gold, seemingly the only one of its kind in the level, lacking any kind of hoverability like the other creatures. It just walked back and forth on the platform. But it wasn't long after I found it that the flying machine swooped down and grabbed it, and then flew off with it. The machine apparently had not seen me, so I decided to follow it, to see where it was taking the creature. The machine stopped at a room with a large cauldron-like object in the center. The machine hovered over the cauldron and dropped the creature into it. The creature emerged from a hole in the cauldron's side, now adorned in the same gold color as everything else. The machine flew off. I'm not really sure what to make of this, but I'm glad I came upon it, because I found the exit soon after. When I got back to the board, I realized that the bosses hadn't moved at all. A bit odd, but it didn't bother me. It made planning my route through Entropy easier. There were still two new icons to explore, the Indigo Cliffs and the black version of the labyrinth. Since there were only 3 black labyrinth icons, which were surrounded by bosses, I played the Indigo Cliffs first. It was a lot like the blue-green mountains. The level graphics had the same shredded look to it. There's also a recolor of the clouds and moon from the toxic waste dump. The music, if you can call it that, was merely a deep rumbling noise. One of the first things I encountered were these multicolored creatures with big heads emerging from a small cave in the ground. They all made a synchronized shaking sound, and they walked to the right in a group after emerging from the cave, ignoring me. Having no other way to go, I followed them onto their route. More and more emerged from the cave until the group had about 100 creatures. Eventually the pathway ended in a cliff. I was shocked to see that upon reaching the cliff, all the creatures began jumping off into the abyss. I've seen enemies walk off cliffs before, but I've never seen NPCs commit mass suicide like this. Very unsettling way to start off a level. I continued flying over various strange animals, like the ones shown here. Another group of multicolored bobbleheads was jumping up and down, only to be snatched up by large birds, which I'm fairly sure are sprite versions of the giant condor from Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster. I defeated some of the condors in battle, but it bothered me that these bobbleheads seem to be so eager to die. If the game itself is alive, perhaps the creatures in these levels are also alive. And some have very unhappy lives, if this behavior isn't any indication. But what provokes them to do this? In the back of my mind, I almost suspect that the glowing moon in the sky is the reason. At the end of the level, I saw yet another group of the bobbleheads marching up to the large monster and being devoured. This was starting to disgust me, so acting on impulse, I fired off eye beams at both the monster and the bobbleheads. I destroyed the cave. The monster became angry and ran through the remaining bobbleheads to fight me. Although it lacked any ranged attacks, it was relentless, but it was no match for me. I was in the home stretch now, up to the bosses. My plan was to go through Batra first, then Megalon, and after that I would watch the last TV screen, play the Black Labyrinth before fighting Mecha Godzilla. And lastly, going through the chase with the Hell Beast. I was curious to see if it would be in a new form again. But first things first, time to beat up Batra. As I expected, he started off in his larva form. The music was Varen's battle theme. Whenever the game puts in a new Godzilla kaiju with more than one form, the other form always shows up. For a game that's otherwise inexplicable, it's rather startling in its consistency and accuracy with the new kaiju bosses. The fight started off simple. The larva Batra fought in a similar fashion as Magulma did, charging back and forth, occasionally firing off lightning from its horn. During the fight, I noticed that Mothra's combat abilities had been altered in my favor. The I-beams did 2 times as much damage as they did originally. Now, they were as strong as Godzilla's punches. The poison powder was similarly improved. It also did this nice thing where it would actually hit an enemy when you used it. Number 2, in the original game, even though Mothra could fly, she was unable to fly over an opponent. You would get knocked back the same way as if you ran straight into them, which was extremely annoying, but not anymore. It could change direction and fly around, which was a big help because fighting Imago Batra is much like fighting a clone Mothra. Although Batra is distinctively faster and stronger, no longer impeded by its slow-moving larva form, Imago Batra was a fearsome opponent. Although it lacked the horn lightning, it now had a new, more powerful I-beam. Batra could change direction just like I could, so this battle involved a lot of flipping and flying around. It was pretty damn fun, to be honest. So after defeating Batra, I was excited to see what Megalon would be like. But first, I went through an Indigo Cliffs level, and shot through a lot of the creatures for the health power-ups. So about Megalon, his music was Gigan's theme. Makes sense, since Gigan was his battle partner in Megalon's one, and so far only film appearance. He was a lot like Moguera, but faster. And with more weapons, he'd start out charging off with his drills. I liked to fly back and forth around him, which seemed to really annoy him. And after a few seconds, he'd step back, turn around, and start spitting out grenades. Those were a pain, because they'd bounce when they'd hit the ground. Lastly, he started spamming his lightning beam. It only went straight forward, so it was easy to duck under it and then shoot him with the I-beams. Overall, I describe him as a strong, persistent creature, but dumb. I was now nearing the end of Entropy. I had just taken down Megalon, and I started up the last TV screen to see what I'd get this time. The result was unpleasant. The music for this gruesome scene was a password theme. I couldn't figure out why this animation was so sinister and violent in comparison to the other two. The whole game seemed to be growing more malevolent. As I went on to finish Entropy, I began to feel drained. It's hard to describe, like I had suddenly become tired when I wasn't before. Most likely it was just the tension from all that happened in the game getting me, but who knows. The last level type on Entropy is what I'd call the Shadow Labyrinth. The scenery was recolored from gold to black. The music was an evil ambience, similar to the unforgiving cold loop, but distinctively different. The music was my first sign that this level was going to be distressing. I traveled through the maze for about a minute, and I noticed that there weren't any creatures hovering around. It was an odd transition from the gold labyrinth, which was overrun by creatures, to this level that had nothing at all. But then this might be a good thing. Maybe there wouldn't be any obstacles and I could get through the level with ease. Then the screen went dark, and immediately I snapped out of my daze from a few seconds earlier. Everything had been darkened so that the only thing I could see was the Mothra sprite. I couldn't tell where I was going, and I ended up frantically running into walls. I heard a noise, the sound of a crowd running through a hallway, and along with the running came the roars, loud roaring sounds, which I would describe as something like a rabid dog the size of an elephant, screaming with fury. And I could tell that whatever was making this noise, there were lots of them. I knew that something was there, but I wasn't until I did some screen cap editing that I got to see what my pursuers looked like. But at the time I couldn't see where they were or where I was going. I was literally running blind, and this mob of beasts eventually caught up with me. All I could think of was no, as I saw my life bar rapidly declining. The monsters had taken me down to half of my total health. When I was saved, the light came back on, and the attackers had disappeared. And so the challenge of this level was revealed. Find the exit before the lights go out and a pack of monsters maul you to death. I was in panic mode now, moving as fast as I could, trying to every path I could find for a way out. As I played through the level, the lights went out a total of 3 times. The second time I would have been dead meat, had it not been for one of the wide-eyed statues. As I stayed close to it, the monsters seemed to all avoid me until the light came back. The statue warded them away, somehow. I was safe as long as I stayed near the statue, but at the same time I had to leave to find the exit. The Shadow Labyrinth turned out to be much smaller than the Gold Labyrinth, as it only took about 6 minutes to navigate to the end. But before the exit was a row of halls heading straight down, with no way out once entered. You either got to take the exit before the monsters reached you, or you died. Thankfully, I made it out. Only one more boss, Godzilla. I started the battle and got something unexpected. Not only did my life shoot back to 100% again, it seems to do that randomly though, but instead of a replacement boss, I was fighting Godzilla. But any Godzilla fan worth their salt can figure this out. Godzilla started off like fighting a clone Godzilla, but his disguise burned away only after 3 life bars. Usually a transformation only occurred at the halfway point. At this point, it was like fighting Godzilla in the normal game. Felt kinda nice to fight one of the original enemies, for a change. Although he wasn't exactly like normal, he also had a rainbow beam and finger missiles. This prevented me from doing the old trick of backing him into a corner and hitting him with I-beams in the spot where he can't hit me. But that was like a cheap trick anyways, though. But after getting him down to half his health, something weird started to happen. His sprite started to glitch, in much the same way as Godzilla had way back in the first world. After a few seconds, the glitches began to form a new shape, and thus the game had created not Godzilla. And I discovered that this visual glitch was somehow related to the game recreating things. The human face on this one gives it a very uncanny look. It was one of the stronger replacement monsters, and had the most firepower. Pictured here, its mouth beam, which I got caught in the middle of. Even though it was a bit stronger, it was also slower than its original counterpart and couldn't jump around as much. I won the fight by constantly staying out of its line of fire, bombarding the machine with poison powder as I flew over it. One last thing to do, the Hell Beast chase. Oh boy, might as well just get this over with, I thought. The Entropy End chase ended up being exactly what I was afraid it would be, a labyrinth level. All the other chases, although difficult, were extremely straightforward. You had to run to the right and not get touched. But this took all the simplicity out of it. There was no telling how big this labyrinth would be, or where the exit was, and now not only did I have to constantly backtrack to find my way out, I had to avoid getting one-hit killed by the red monster. And for those 30 seconds, for the first 30 seconds rather, it didn't show up. But I knew it would. And as I started picking up the pace, I heard a loud, flapping noise. And there it was, in a flying form. It flew with bat-like wings, and was as fast as relentless as ever. For reasons already stated, this was probably the most nerve-wracking of all the end chases, and as such I had to keep my focus on the game, and not taking screen caps. However, I did take one of the red monster doing something I found very interesting. I had managed to lose it by going through a different path than it apparently expected, and it was blocked from attacking me by one of the organic walls of the red labyrinth, or so I thought. I tried clawing through the wall for a second before opening up its mouth and tearing the wall apart with the intestine jaws, but those brief milliseconds that the monster was held back might have been the key to me finding the exit. The path to exit was long and complex, but from what I remember I went up, and then back towards the left. I'm still not sure why I chose that particular way, just a lucky hunch I suppose. I was sweating profusely, but my luck had saved me yet again. I hoped that it wouldn't run out before I finished the game. There's only 2 more worlds to go. Next was the penultimate world, called Extus. Alright, so this is the longest chapter of this NES Godzilla creepypasta. This is Entropy Chapter 5, and, the last one, we said was filler, and we wanted something different, and I guess this is what we got, right, Mike?
Yep, be careful what you wish for, because you just might get it.
Exactly. Now, first off, one of the things we noticed right off the bat was the quizzes get incredibly morbid at this point, Now it asks, have you killed anyone? Do you want to kill? And it does affect the gameplay with the Mothra intro, you know what I mean? Like the introduction to the whole Mothra character when asked, do you like Mothra? And then it just went crazy,
Yeah, the questions definitely aren't as fluffy as they were earlier, and yeah, they're getting much darker, much more intense, and it apparently affects the player's game.
Exactly, and the next one is, as we move on, we see one of the new environments. We see the woods, and the woods, we had to mention this. The background is just incredibly out of place. Mike said it looks like something out of MS Paint, and that's for sure. Just look at the trees.
Look like the spray paint can. Somebody just took a spray paint can and made it forest.
Yeah, it just takes you out of the whole experience. Like the ones before were actually exceptionally well done. Here it's just like, what are we looking at here? And then the next one is the introduction of the, other characters like the deers and whatnot. And we'll see more of them later. But next thing, the big thing is the TVs, which show like the beaver licking the lollipop. What's going on here? Do you have anything about that, Mike? What is the significance?
Well, all I gotta say is just like, insert sexual innuendo here. You have a beaver licking a rainbow lollipop. Just, for really, that's free for interpretation.
I'm just looking at it, the thing is, I'd be somewhat creeped out, but this is just a, what the fuck moment,
Definitely.
That's what it is. It's not even like gory. It's nothing to do with the game, really. It's just a beaver licking a lollipop. I mean,
I've talked about the different levels of like scary, creepy. This is just really disturbing. And just kind of like you said, just what the fuck, man?
like I don't even know what to say. And then the next thing we see is a new gameplay edition, the hourglasses, which change time and the whole level. And you mentioned, and then you mentioned there was something about it being a theme. And before we go into it, we also see a new industrial environment too, where we see a deer eating the nuclear waste. I don't even know if that is a deer, but it's eating nuclear waste. But you said there were themes going on, like a theme of pollution, theme of time. Could you explain on that?
Well, it's just really noticing that this chapter is very symbolic. It just has a lot of really strong imagery in a screen caps. Like I said, when I first see like that industrial setting, it really takes me back to like Godzilla versus Ghidorah or Godzilla versus the Smog Monster, where like I said, it's just got these really strong undertones, and I don't know if they pay off. I guess we'll just have to see in later chapters.
Right, and then you see like one of the technical things we actually mentioned, some of the early things, with some of these screenshots, they have so many enemies, and the funny thing is there's not any flickering going on, which just sort of feels really out there, you know what I mean? I mean, we've all played Mega Man 2 or like the Mega Man games, right?
Yeah, I mean, any NES gamer will tell you that, you can, everybody's seen the flickering sprites. If
Right.
you got way too many sprites on your screen, the NES hardware couldn't really handle it,
Yeah.
It couldn't handle the different.
And same
It
thing
can
if you play on an emulator too. I mean, even in emulators just simply just emulate the hardware. So even if you're going to get flickering on the NES, you're going to get the same flickering on the PC. So it makes no sense either way. I mean, just the detail behind the enemies and the amount of them, it's just overwhelming. And it's funny to see that there is no flickering going on in these.
Yeah, it's almost a little too polished, a little too perfect.
Yeah, it's just it's the uncanny valley, I think, really.
Yeah.
Now, when you go more forward into it, you see the winter stage pop up again with the same MS Paint background. You see like the new raptor enemies here and killing everything in their path. So they work in packs and basically just dominate everything else, And this is where you start seeing more blood and whatnot. And I think this is where Not Gazora may have originated from the last chapter. And now the next thing, though, is the Moon Beast, which emerges from the water. The Moon Beast, the moon breaking with the, person falling into the water, the Moon Beast coming out. I mean, what do you think about that?
Again, this chapter just has these really just heavy images, man. It has a lot of, I can't help but think that there's some kind of symbolism behind it all.
Right.
Maybe I'm looking into it too much, and that's what we do after all, is just kind of overanalyze this.
Right. I mean, don't tell me one thing. That does look like Ridley, though. Once you look at the Moon Beast.
That I did not notice that. Mind blown.
Now, the next thing you see is one of the big revelations is Melissa. Okay, Melissa's the old girlfriend, and she gets hit by a truck. And you have anything else to add to that? I believe that's a pretty big revelation now.
Well, we talked about the game, breaking down the fourth wall. Well, to me, the game is like broke down the fourth wall and destroyed it and started building up a fifth wall and then blew that up. I mean, the game's really getting just really personal now at this point.
Right.
It adds a little bit of emotion.
Right, and I think it said she also has like she has a mental disorder and cause her to go into like episodes. So I think she has like, I mean, I'm not a psychologist or anything or a neurologist or anything. I mean, I'm an engineer, but the thing is, when you look at that, I'm thinking she has like schizophrenia or something, right?
Yeah, I can't help but feel like, all this strange imagery that we're seeing is like a manifestation of her thoughts or her
Yeah, I mean, I'm not that big into like I don't know everything about schizophrenia, but it's sort of like that. You're sort of seeing all these things, just are really out of place. And then you start seeing the game going kill, 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 kill. It goes apeshit, and then you see Red's face, which is such a brilliant way that, like, in terms of formatting and everything,
Again, Red is the glue that holds this creepypasta.
Exactly. And then the next part, okay, I love how these things are split into parts, by the way. That's how long this creepypasta is, okay? That's how long this one is. And then you see, like, the player, they're bursting out screaming, and you sort of understand their reaction. I mean, if the game got that personal, I mean, even we would be, quite freaked out, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, at this point, I don't know what I would be thinking, or if I even would be.
Right. And then the next thing here is a TV screen comes back again with like this, again, it's another what the fuck moment. It's just opening its mouth, closing it again, opening it. It reminds me of like the original Grand Theft Auto, you know?
Yeah, I mean, so far, every TV screen I've seen in this chapter is just, again, it's a big, just, what the fuck? you know?
What is going on? Make some sense, but no. And then the next thing is the maze levels, okay? It's the first time we see a maze level, okay? So instead of a strict platformer, we went directly to the maze.
Yeah, the original Godzilla NES was really, I just call it a side scroller. There it was very linear. There wasn't many pitfalls or anything. But now it's just getting so elaborate, and like you said, it's a maze now. It's turned into more of this strange, creepy platformer. I would really want to see where this is going.
Right. And then now, the next thing we see is the big one is the kaiju lemmings. Okay, the kaiju lemmings come here, and I say kaiju lemmings. I mean, just look at them. And I think personally, and I'm overanalyzing this, but it's like I think it's touching on the theme that I think it's trying to tell the player that there are things out of their control. I mean, they get snatched away, and these lemmings do die, from what it seems. And it's like, I think it's sort of regarding Melissa again. I mean, things are out of the control, and the player, I guess, should not blame themselves or really try to, I guess, move on. I think that's what it's trying to say.
Yeah, that's a good theory. I have to say, to me, it feels like it's almost like a representation of a player maybe trying to go through the motions to finish the game. He doesn't know where he's going. He doesn't know where it's going to end off.
Right.
He wants to reach that cliff.
Exactly. And then the next thing is that you see more classic bosses get reintroduced, which is nice. And then you see the next TV screen, and oh man, this TV screen. Whew!
I don't know what channel he's watching, but I will make sure never to watch that TV.
I mean, bludgeoning to the head. Now we know this game is just straight up unexpected. I mean, we expect another WTF moment out of here. Again, it's another WTF moment, I guess, but it's not the same.
It just got real. You know what I mean? It just got so much more heavy and so much.
I mean, I feel as though that's a representation of the reader's mind just getting completely destroyed by this one picture.
Maybe.
Maybe. Next thing you see is the running away from the packs of monsters, which I think is a little creepy when you look at the aesthetics, because the level gets darker and whatnot, and the music is loud and roaring, which is, it's just, I mean, it sort of reminds me of Chrono Trigger again, with Magus' army constantly chanting. I guess that's what rings in my head. But that's just another reference there. Then you see the Mecha Godzilla fight with the rainbow beams, and it disintegrates into, another, dog creature. I mean, I guess we're getting really desensitized to this, aren't we?
At first, if that would have happened in the first chapter, it would have blown me away, But now I'm just like, okay, what's this kaiju going to transform into,
Yeah.
Losing the effect that I think the writer initially wanted, because now I'm just like, okay.
Yay. And then the next one, the final one, really, is the chase with Red again. And now it's in a maze. And it's really cool because, in one hit, this thing can kill you. So it gets this whole tense moment going on. I wish there were more screen caps of this.
Yeah, really. Like I said, Red is awesome. Anything Red does really adds to this creepypasta.
Yeah.
I personally find it interesting that this is the third iteration of Red that we've seen now. We've seen the walking form, we've seen the swimming form. Now this is the flying.
It's like the weird angel demon kind of thing.
Yeah. It reminds me of I think we've talked about this before, but the kaiju evolution, or even a Pokemon evolution. It really, he's changing and transforming.
He's adapting to us,
Exactly.
And you see some crumbling, which I guess is too intensive for the NES, but that's really all I gotta say on the technicals, and I guess that's really all we gotta say on the whole, chapter here, this super long chapter. But yeah, this is a long video already, but anyways, this has been our analysis on this chapter. The next one is Chapter 6, Exodus, so when we get there, you'll get to see us read that, and you get to hear our analysis. So for now, this is me and Mike, and we're out, so see you all then.
Peace.